MagMongoSlade.
Welcome to 3Con Commentaries. Today we're going to talk about Eddie Guerrero's WWE Biography, which aired May 27th, 2024. It was an excellent biography. The only problem I have is it seemed to be all old footage, interviews from Eddie when he was alive, interviews from Vicky from 20 years ago, Mondo and in this thing from 20 years ago. But it still ended up being pretty good. It was not just a rehash of the WWE biography they had put out on DVD several years ago, even though a lot of that footage is the same footage from filmed around that same time, let's put it. It tells this obviously the same story, but there are some changes in here. And one of the changes that I really want to discuss is about the Latino Heat character and how it represents the Latin Chicano people. Because in Eddie's book, he of course talked about Latino Heat, the creation of the character, what his inspirations were. He discussed that in Biography too, and that was new. I didn't know where he eventually had gotten the idea for the Latino Heat character. But we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about his feelings towards representation and whether this lie, cheat, and steal Latino Heat gimmick fully represented the Chicano people. And we're also going to look at some people who, I guess, disagree. So this ought to be a fun delve into the character of Eddie Guerrero, more so than the man. Like, everybody already knows what his story is. So let's get into that. So in the biography, he mentions that he gets the character Latino Heat from the movie The Birdcage, which came out in 1996, in which one of the characters mentioned his Guatemalan heat. Now, in the book that he co-wrote, WWE produced it, was it Cheating, Death, Stealing, Life, I believe it's called. Eddie wrote, "I got the idea for Latino Heat when I saw the movie The Birdcage. I loved Hank Azaria's character, Agador, the flaming houseboy. At one point in the film, he asked Robin Williams' character why would he let him perform in his show. He said something like, 'Are you afraid of my Guatemalan heat?' And I just thought that was hilarious. In the beginning, Latino Heat was the guy that thinks he's God's gift to women, even though he really isn't. I know I'm not a particularly handsome guy, and that's what made it a clever character. I had been thinking about this character for a long time, even before my car accident. I knew I wanted to create a character that reflected La Raza, my Chicano heritage. It would be based on the barrio guys that I grew up with, my buds in El Paso." He says, "I'm so proud of La Raza. I'm proud of my culture of lowriders and Chicanx and Tejano music. I know who we are. I know the truth. With the emergence of Latino Heat, the time had finally come for me to show that side of myself." So later, he talks about doing the gimmick with Chavo, Los Guerreros. And he says, quote, "My Latino Heat character had been growing in popularity for some time, but it wasn't until Los Guerrero that people actually started liking me. It wasn't supposed to be that way. We cheated every way we could, and it ended up charming the fans. We tricked and conned everybody, always coming up with new ways to fool the refs. Instead of hating us for it, the fans ate it up. They looked forward to seeing us lie, cheat, and steal our way to victory. In the beginning, the cheers confused the shit out of me. We were supposed to be the heels. I would get to the back and say to Chavito, 'What the hell are we doing wrong out there? What do we have to do to get them to boo us?' Then I remember something my dad used to say. Son, he'd tell me, it doesn't matter if it's good news or bad news, as long as they spell your name right. I never understood that until Chavito and I started getting over. I realized that he was telling me not to worry about whether they were cheering or booing, as long as they were reacting. And then later he says, one thing you can't do is force feed the people. You could try to relay the story you want to tell, but in the end, it's the fans who decide. If they want you to be a babyface, then believe me, you'll end up as a babyface. Even though Los Guerreros did all the kinds of heel things in order to be the bad guys, we did it in such a fun and entertaining way that the people liked it. They enjoyed the fact that we weren't hiding it from them, that we were doing our lying, cheating, and stealing right there in the open. So, this is true. This is what he discussed and is discussed in the documentaries, both of them, the biography and the original WWE documentary from like 2005 or something. So he says later on about this, he says, the crowd starts going off their rocker every time they see me getting ready to lie, cheat, or steal. To Latino heat is all part of the game. Lying, cheating, and stealing is just the way things are. The only time it's wrong to do those things is when you get caught. If you don't get caught, you win. That's the psychology all along. Cheat to win. And then he says, there's never been a Chicano wrestler that has gotten the exposure that I have. Certainly a lot of Chicanos and Chicanas have had a tremendous impact on our culture over the last 10 years. He says, there are people that I look up to, people that come from the Chicano community and became larger than life without turning their backs on who they really are. And he says later, he says, they say the key to any great wrestling character is finding something that's within you and then exaggerating it. Latino heat is a huge part of who I am. It's my Chicano heritage taken to the extreme. Obviously, Latino heat is a bit of a cartoon, but that doesn't make it a negative stereotype. Far from it. I don't think I would have been blessed with the love and support of the Chicano community if they truly felt Latino heat was a bad representation of my people. A lot of the Latino heat comes from how I use the Chicano slang words ese or orale. Some refer to it as Spanglish, but I refer to it as Chicanics. It's exaggerated, to be sure, but it's actually pretty true to life. And then he gets into a bit of a rant about a writer in a magazine saying that he's using a fake accent, which he says, I'm a real Mexican, so I can't have a fake accent. And then he says, it's exactly the way we talk on the streets when I'm among my people. I might not speak that way around everybody, but when I'm around my buddies, that's exactly how I talk. When I'm with Tori and Hector, it's nothing but essay this and essay that. We're very proper when we're doing business or around other non-Chicano people. But when we're among ourselves, that's our lingo. This, of course, is called code switching, which, of course, we know everybody does. I work with Arabs and stuff all the time. They'll speak Arabic to each other, but they'll speak English to you. Not that difficult to wrap your mind around it. There's cultural lingo, and I like that he said that it's like a cartoon because pretty much everything in WWE is super exaggerated. In the biography, he says that he has dealt with a lot being Chicano. And being Chicano basically means that you are a Mexican in the United States. And he talked about not being a real Mexican to his cousins because he was born in the United States, and not being a real American in the U.S. because he's of Mexican descent. But this is the culture he grew up with. And this is something that had not been done prior on television, that there were no others who were doing something what he was doing, And he felt like he was really kind of exposing something that was already there, but he's kind of shining a light on it, saying these people exist. And he says in his book, I've also heard from people who complain that lying, cheating, and stealing reinforces negative stereotypes of Chicano people. But name one politician that hasn't done that. Forget that. Try and name any person that's never lied or cheated or stolen. Shame on anyone who thinks those are Chicano characteristics. Those things aren't exclusive to Mexican Americans. There's something we all do at one point or another. Latino heat is just being honest about it. Besides, it's not like I live my life that way. As true to life as it may be, Latino heat is still, after all, a freaking TV character. So this becomes a very short discussion in the biography, as Bailey, who is half Latino, talks about being in the building when Eddie won the championship and how exciting it was when she was there. And some people are saying, hey, this Chicano, lie, cheat, and steal thing might be a little on the offensive side. Of course, it's being done with a wink and a smile, That's what's supposed to make it charming. Is that, yeah, this guy's supposed to be a bad dude, But then so is, Robin Hood supposed to be a bad guy. And, Batman is also not a good guy because he's a vigilante. And, you can do things with charm and innovation, and people will appreciate that. Because especially if you have charisma, then you can get these things over. And he continues saying, Latino Heat was a character that nobody else had ever done, which made it something special. I wasn't a babyface or a heel. I was something in between, and the people loved it. It didn't matter how mean or evil my behavior became. The people were cheering every bad thing that I did. There were endless variations I could do with my lying, cheating, and stealing, hitting my opponent with the title belt, then tossing it out of the ring, taking the timekeeper's hammer and handing it to my opponent so the ref would see him holding it. As long as I was entertaining, the people will let me get away with it. And he's right, clearly, because we watch this stuff in real time actually work. And to double down on something he said earlier about being a representative, a positive representation on Chicano culture, he says, WWE had made a point of pushing me as a Latino wrestler, especially as far as the house shows were concerned. In return, I sacrificed almost all of my days off to go and do promotion. I went to Telemundo, on Univision. I did TV and newspaper interviews, all the Latin markets. The thing is, all of our efforts produced, we were drawing great houses in all the Hispanic communities. Now the only question was about what kind of house we do at an actual pay-per-view. And then he starts discussing the the attendance at No Way Out 2004 when he won the title. He says, on the day of the show, only 80% of the tickets had been sold. By the time Brock and I hit the ring, they were turning people away. The walk-up was tremendous. The Cow Palace ended up selling 3,000 more tickets than they had expected. We had to move the curtains back to make room for all the fans that had shown up. The best part was that the majority of the walk-up business came from Mexican Americans. La Raza turned out in record numbers to see one of their own get a shot at the WWE Championship. Seeing all the Latino faces in the audience was such a great feeling. It felt so good to see all the hard work pay off. Kind of as a little Cody Rhodes nod, even though clearly this was like 20 years before Cody showed up. He mentioned that he's the only Guerrero to get a shot at a world title since his dad wrestled Luthez, which is great. So Eddie supported the gimmick. He did an interview way back in the halcyon days of, I think, 2001. This is from Slam Wrestling, where he talked about, again, being portrayed as being a stereotype. And he actually discusses this again. So Eddie got a little defensive. Again, this is 2001. So he's a little bit more defensive rather than, when he wrote the book, which was a little bit, helped write the book, which was a little bit later. He says, how does it portray Mexicans in a bad way? Are you talking about the so-called educated Mexicans? Because I'm educated and I don't think it's racial. That's my people. It's what I am. I'm a Chicano. I'm a Latino. You go down to the hood and this is what you see. These are the guys that I grew up with. Now that I'm not doing the heavy Cheech Marin accent anymore, I'm more like a normal Mexican American. The Cheech Marin accent was there for a while when I was doing the thing with China, but that was done mostly for comedy. That's what the WWF wanted, and I had a problem. And if I had a problem with it, why didn't the media ever ask Cheech Marin for it? He made millions of dollars, and he's still making millions off of it. He's a Latino too, so they don't question him for doing it. I've heard him talk with his real voice, and he doesn't talk anything like that. So if you're questioning me about that, that's like questioning Cheech Marin about that, or any other actor for portraying that. It's acting, man. It's a role. So he's basically saying he recognizes that some people have a problem with the exaggerated Spanglish and the exaggerated accent and certain things like this. So he knew that the criticism was there, and the criticism exists in the biography too. But he doesn't see it as being a negative thing. He sees it as him playing off of the guys that he grew up with. He's saying, I grew up in this culture. I have a right to do this. These guys exist. These people exist. I know that you don't want them to exist, or you think that they're, bad people or whatever, but they do exist. and we should play off of them. And as you know, being black and everything, I see this all the time when people talk about Crime Time. That, Crime Time was racist, even though it was the idea of JTG. And pretty much every time he's asked, he said the same thing over and over again, that Crime Time was his idea. People are like, well, Vince still shouldn't have let it make television. It's like, sometimes people like to play with those stereotypes, and sometimes they work. John Cena is in some way was a stereotype of the stereotypical white rapper. Even he was exaggerating how hard he was with his facial expressions and all that kind of stuff. The spinning chain, the hat turned back, the jerseys, the cultural appropriation that John Cena was doing. Even he could garner some criticism for that. So these people are aware of what they're doing, but they don't see a problem with it. And everybody is not going to feel the same way, clearly, because when you talk about quote unquote representation, how do you represent, hundreds of millions of people? It's just not reasonable that you would represent all of those people. But if you're a good representation of the people that, at least that then you should feel more comfortable. It'd be one thing if you didn't know anything about these kinds of people. And you also get this kind of thing with Apollo Crews, another gimmick that everybody said was racist, because he was speaking with a Nigerian accent. Well, he's Nigerian. His parents are anyway. Why wouldn't he speak with a Nigerian accent? I've seen comedians do it. So what's the problem? You've seen Eddie Murphy go up there and speak with an exaggerated African accent. Was Coming to America racist? Was, Black Panther racist? And these are the sorts of questions when you're dealing with woke idiots that you're kind of, I hate to throw that line in there, but that's exactly what you're dealing with. What kind of people that, are questioning you about whether what you're doing is a stereotype or not. That there's always other people who have done it usually, or these are reflections of people that you actually know, and you're utilizing that to shine a mirror onto them. And in some ways they can be offended by it, but then they might also be proud of it too. So I decided to dig up one of the criticisms. One of the guys in the documentary discussed this whole thing. He was of Chicano descent, I'd imagine. But he wasn't the one that I found. I found an article from some guy. Let's just do some random guy. It doesn't matter who this guy is. But it was from 2015, and it's about Eddie Guerrero. And I decided we're going to listen to, you've heard all of what Eddie had to say about it. And he's very sensitive about the subject of him not being a proper representative of Latino culture. But this guy who is Latino, Chicano, writes, quote, Guerrero's cultural appropriation underscores racial underpinning that occurs within the professional wrestling entertainment industry. Guerrero's particular wrestling persona exhibits a stereotypical Latino persona that is masculinized, eroticized, and criminalized, as exhibited by vignettes portraying Los Guerreros playing golf or hosting sexy pool parties. Despite Eddie Guerrero's reluctance to engage in these vignettes, Guerrero submitted to the industry because he was assured it was best for his career. While Guerrero's apparent personification as a low-riding cholo presents an overarching narrative of the Mexican gangster, the racial appropriation enacted by the industry creates a questionable and problematic commercialized exploitation of an oppressed ethnic minority. So you just know this guy has, gotten his ducks in a row. All his progressive T's and I's are crossed and dotted. It didn't actually seem to me that Eddie Guerrero was supposed to be any kind of gangster. He came across as, Bugs Bunny with a goatee. That's muscles and a goatee. That's pretty much what he was. Bugs Bunny was, a trickster. When you're a trickster kind of character, you can get away with cheating and doing underhanded things. But the reason is you're not supposed to initiate these things, That's really one thing where Eddie kind of did go into the heel territory, is that he would also initiate the cheating. It's not like he was cheating in retaliation for other people cheating. It was about Eddie getting over on the unsuspecting refs, getting over on unsuspecting people in the audience. And that was supposed to be the charming element of it. That's the wink and the nod of it. Like, I got you, And that was supposed to be the cute element of it. This guy takes it to the extreme and says that, well, he's a masculinized, eroticized, and criminalized ... Mexican gangster. Like, he's not a gangster at all. Like, can you partake in a culture without it being gangster? Like, for instance, if you're a boots and jeans, a hoodie kind of guy, does that mean you're gang banging or out trying to steal? No. Plenty of people just dress like that because it's the culture that they grew up in. They go to work every day. They don't hang out, at the barber shop, or they don't hang on street corners with winos. They just wear boots and jeans and hoodies, and that's just how they dress. I mean, why does that have to be a negative thing? Goes back to what I was saying about Crime Time. You have do-rags and you got, braids and, the grills and stuff like that. Does that stuff have to be negative? No. But when you're trying to be a reflection of a certain culture, those are the kind of things that you're going to utilize in doing so, because those are cultural markers. And if you want people to identify with the character, you want to utilize as many of those cultural markers as you possibly can. So Eddie did the same thing. He used the cultural markers that people would recognize and invented this character that is supposed to be a representative of, the behaviors of the people that he grew up with, who were good-natured guys who might get over on you. They may trick you here and there. And doesn't necessarily mean that they're gangsters. Gangsters, as far as I'm concerned, are like extortionists and people who pull pistols on folks. Eddie Guerrero was more of a con artist, and anybody could be a good con artist. That is like what Eddie said in one of his interviews, or even in his book. That's not a Mexican American thing. It's not. The Spanglish is, but that was the most, Hispanic, that and the lowriders was the most Hispanic part of it. Everything else could just be, he's a con artist. He's a scam artist. And that could be anybody. Ric Flair, dirtiest player in the game. He just didn't play it for laughs. Eddie did. Eddie played his cheating for laughs. What's the problem? Also, I take umbrage with the concept of it being cultural appropriation, because he's not culturally appropriating anything. That would be like if his name was Edward Smith and he's pretending to be a guy named Eddie Guerrero on television. It's like, no, this guy really name is Eddie Guerrero and he's playing, Eddie Guerrero on television, and Eddie Guerrero is basically borrowing parts of his personality from people that he knew. No different than The Rock borrows certain cultural elements from like Muhammad Ali, Deion Sanders, black people, even though he walks around with a Samoan tattoo. I know a lot of people get upset about that, but I don't care. Like, it is what it is. When people exist, and these are personalities that people are familiar with, taking bits and pieces of those personalities and integrating them into yourself for the purpose of, I guess, being a representative, or at least being familiar enough to that audience, is not a problem for me. Crime Time did not offend me. It didn't upset me at all. Because, one, I'm not a we-centered person. I'm a me-centered person. Meaning, if it's not directed at me directly, I really don't concern myself with it. Second, people like that exist. You watch enough rap videos, you see Crime Time all the time. So if you're going to be upset about Crime Time, you should be upset about every rap video that you see. Similar to what, Eddie was talking about with Cheech Marin, But I choose to look at that and say, all of these guys are just playing a character for a camera. There's no point in overthinking it, and trying to write think pieces about it. Some people just choose to entertain in that way. And I'm fine with that. I'm okay with that. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below. The biography was phenomenal. I suggest everybody watch it, especially the parts about Dominic. But then again, if you listen to Dominic's interviews where he talked about working with Eddie, getting paid and taking time off school and all that kind of stuff, that was fun. That, of course, was not in the WWE documentary from several years ago because Dominic was still a kid back then. But it was really good from top to bottom. I loved it. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.